Hello, everyone, and welcome to another special edition of the Armstrong Williams Show. And our guest today for the full hour is Reese. Welcome to the broadcast.
Armstrong, thanks so much for having me.
What are the issues with modern medicine today?
Well, if you look at the United States, just as one example, we die 8 years earlier than our European counterparts on average, and we spend about 3 times more on healthcare. So we're spending a lot of money, and we're getting really bad results, right? Worse than the world, actually, results. And I think that that's because we've really focused on not addressing the largest causes of disease, which are chronic illnesses, and I think that we've put our overall health in the hands of bigger and bigger corporations. So that's pharma companies, that's big ag, and big food, and that's the PBMs that are supposed to be the pharmacy benefit managers that are supposed to be regulating the prices of these drugs. All of those things are working together to really create an unhealthy environment, right? So we're being bombarded by toxicity. We're being, our food, I don't know if you know this, but you can't sell United States chocolate in Europe because it's not chocolate. So what we do is before it becomes chocolate here, we take out the cacao butter, we take out all the healthy fats, we replace them with junk fats from palm oil, and then we reconstitute that and sell it as chocolate in this country. And the shea butter and the cacao and all of these great things that are actually super healthy fats to consume, those get put into makeups and other beauty products that end up being sold yet again, right? So the health of the American consumer has been really sold, right? It's been really bought and sold, and the chocolate example is just one of hundreds, right? I mean, our wheat isn't allowed into Europe because we spray it with a cancer-causing agent called glyphosate, right? And we spray it in huge quantities, right? The largest quantity of glyphosate that you can consume as a human are Cheerios. So things that are made for our kids that have a picture of how your heart is healthy on the box, but they're literally covered in a cancer-causing agent that's a pesticide, and I mean covered, right? So those are the biggest issues. I think you have toxicity. I think you have a lack of focus on health span and really healthy aging, and that combination is really creating a toxic soup for us.
If the audience is anything like me, they're still gasping for air off the fact that 8 years they live longer.
Yeah.
8 years.
8 years. So if you look at France and Europe and Germany and Spain and Greece, on average, it's between 7 and 8 years longer in every one of those countries. And the next closest expense for the amount we spend on healthcare is the UK, and we spend 2.5 times more than the UK does.
But it sounds as though we're spending money on dying, not living.
I think of it as sick care, not healthcare. I think that we've created a series of incentives, right? And that series of incentives, that market condition, incentivizes companies to put people on drugs for their whole lives for as long as possible, and maintain their sick care versus solving those problems and the underlying causes, which is really what I think is the important shift, right? I think healthcare over sick care, and I think chronic disease and population health instead of really thinking about the corporate profit and the system and the market that supports it. I think that it's better to think about health span and how we can make people live healthy, longer lives that are productive the whole way through, instead of, look at the chronic disease burden now, right? You've got 40% of kids that have chronic diseases. 40% of children in this country have chronic diseases. Over 65% of the adults have chronic diseases, and most of them have more than one, right? These are things that absolutely limit your productivity. They limit your ability to contribute. They limit your ability to be like to be the person you want to be, right? And one of the quotes that I love that Secretary Kennedy has used a lot is that a sick person only has one dream, but a healthy person has 1,000 dreams.
Someone would ask the question, who's getting rich from our U.S. drug policies?
So it's a great question. I mean, largest industry in the world, right, is drug companies. It's real close with the military-industrial complex, but it's usually the drug companies went out. And I'll tell you something that happened that wasn't on purpose. So these things, the PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, they're the people who determine if the government reimburses your drug. They're the people who determine at what price. And their job originally was very noble. The government created the PBMs so that they could have a direct negotiation around the drug prices to lower the prices with pharma companies. That was the goal. Now it turns out that the PBMs get paid a percentage of the sale. So if you get 50% of the sale and it's $100, you get $50. If it's $100,000, you get $50,000. Which one are you motivated to push for? Higher cost drugs or lower cost drugs? So the answer is these pharmacy benefit managers, the big pharma groups, those are the ones that have had windfall profits that have been historic over the last 20 to 30 years, right? We're talking every year, categorically historic windfall profits. And originally, I think that the government's intention with creating the pharmacy benefit manager was to negotiate with big pharma, lower those prices for patients, get more access. It was to do the right thing. But instead, what happened was that because of the incentive systems, the PBMs got bigger and bigger, right? And those PBMs now take more than 50% of every dollar we spend on drugs goes to the broker who we're supposed to have there to lower the price of drugs. That would be the equivalent, Armstrong, of me and you going and buying a $100,000 house, and instead of paying the real estate broker $3,000 to $6,000, you paid them an extra $100,000. So your $100,000 house costs $200,000. It's unthinkable in any other system.
So then what are the challenges, are the changes that are necessary in this current drug system?
So I think we need to clear a table for innovation, and we need to clear a place at that table for healthcare instead of sick care, like the actual focus on these things, right? It's not like saying these things is one thing, but no one, like the industry hasn't focused on those, right? So, on a personal example, we're currently published in Lancet. And in the last 7 months, I think we've been published in Lancet and Nature more than any other group, right? So 5 or 6 times. And these are all supposed to be important academic journals that point in a direction of where the future of science is, right? That's the goal. And the article right now shows that we had the only phase 3 passed COVID booster that was not mRNA, and we privately funded it. And we're the only company or country that tested against all the different types of boosters that existed. So AstraZeneca, the live and activated virus, and Sinovac, and Pfizer. And we beat them all in safety and efficacy in a phase 3 trial, in a 4,500 person trial, right? And we didn't require the ultra cold chain storage. I don't know if you know this, but mRNA vaccines they get moved at negative 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's extremely different system for installing that around the world to sell this stuff. So with a better, safer mousetrap, and with a fraction of the cost, right? So better, safer, cheaper. That didn't happen, even though the data and the science and everything else was there. So you want the science to be followed, right? And it's not like they didn't know, right? The Biden administration brought us into the White House, just us and Pfizer, to talk about next generation COVID vaccines and asked for it to do these things that we've now proven ours already did. And it was all a charade. It was all just a trick. They wanted cover so they could keep giving the money to Pfizer, and they wanted cover so they could keep giving the money to pet projects that had nothing to do with health. And that's a real thing that happened. So they knew they had a better, safer thing. Americans were literally poisoned by something that they knew was less healthy, and they had the safer, cheaper, better alternative in their hand. So having seen it literally on the front lines, like it's a war, having seen it up close, that's what has to change, right? You actually have to have the goal be, let's make people healthier. That has to be the fundamental goal. And right now it's not the goal. Right now the goal of the industry is actually to see where they can make money, how they can get things approved, how long they can keep them on the market. I mean, think about it. That Pfizer vaccine was on the market for 2 extra years before they finally published the data, which has been available that whole time, that says that it increases the heart attack rates in young people by 600%, says that it causes all of these other horrible series of autoimmune reactions, and yet we just sold it. We sold it as a bill of goods to the American people when there was a safer and cheaper alternative. And that's what has to change. So if the system is controlled and driven by profit and by the sole goal of profit, and the government's job in terms of regulating that out of control motive of profit isn't there, so there's no soft walls around it, really hard to do it.
So what do Americans do as we work these deadly and suffocating issues out? Where do they find trust?
That's a great question, because the trust is eroding, and it's eroding rapidly. It's eroding across the board, right? I mean, it really is. And the access to unadulterated data or real information, valuable information, is increasingly challenged. I mean, I can show you that I can kind of provide a little bit of an example of the way that I think that happens, and the reason that I think we're losing the fight there. I'm optimistic though, and I'll tell you why I'm optimistic.
Hold your optimism and tell us why you think we're losing the fight at the same time, because it sounds like a little contradictory. We're going to take a break. Lou Reese will join us. He's on for the entire hour, and I guess you're asking for the first time, if you don't know the name, who's Lou Reese? You'll find out more about the man himself later in the show. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back. Welcome back to Optimism, but pessimism at the same time, as we talk about where do we restore the trust and who can you trust. Please continue.
So pessimism is that, we have, and this is already, people are becoming aware of this, but, when you look at the review panels for certain drug approvals, right? Doesn't really matter which category. The average FDA review panel had direct ties, every single person on the panel had direct ties to a number of big pharma companies. Not like a few of them, every single person on the panel.
They never saw it as a conflict.
Absolutely not. And these are things that were like clear as day this whole time. And if you look at the way that that's structured, that's a problem. If you look at the way that the cabal was structured around NIH funding, and I'm going to blame Fauci directly for this, right? Like what he did was create a feeder system of the same people getting the same grants and trying to solve the same problems. So, I mean, we're talking 40 years of people being academics doing the same thing, spending tens of millions of dollars to study something that they've been studying for 40 years. And they're the only people in that space that are going to get any grants because they're the only people that have gotten the grants. And so what you end up with is an echo chamber, an ever shrinking echo chamber of non-doers, right? And I tell people this all the time, what do you call a person who, nobody when you look at Elon Musk, nobody says, oh, he's an AI expert or a rocket expert. Turns out that an expert is someone who can tell you exactly how not to solve the problem you want to solve. By definition, because the minute they're not an expert, if it's a big problem, they're a genius or a billionaire. There's no, that expert title just goes away the minute they actually do something. So what I think we're being run by experts and not by doers. And I think that that's really the fundamental issue, is that we should be focusing on what are the outcomes? Why are we trying to get these outcomes? How are we going to demonstrate with the world's best science that we're actually improving people's health span, that we're actually improving their lives, that they're actually getting better, that they're taking less medicines, that they're healthier, that they're functioning better, all these critical things. How are we going to do that with the best science instead of creating a club where we're just burning the money?
Speaking of that, and you did mention Dr. Fauci, take us and help us understand the COVID mRNA.
So there was this technology that's been around for a long time, actually, the mRNA technology, and we've been familiar with it for almost 20 years. And the reason that there was never a drug approved, and there were many trials done, and lots of money spent on it, and lots of government money spent on it. Actually, you'd be shocked at the amount of DARPA and BARDA money that Moderna received early on. Shocked. And that funded a bunch of trials that never got a drug approved. And the reason was that they were not safe. There were side effects that were absolutely unacceptable. And it happened over and over and over and over again over 2 decades. And then this pandemic happens. And it is true that mRNA can make a product fairly quickly, and that you can make a new product and a new design fairly quickly. That's interesting. The world was in a relative panic. There needed to be a solution. I think the president at the time, President Trump, did something historic and interesting, and that had never been done in Operation Warp Speed. And I think that they pushed science faster and further on those selected projects than anybody had ever seen. It was the fastest regulatory pathway, fastest scientific development pathway, all those things. So I think that was fundamentally a great thing, and praised by liberals, conservatives, people around the world. Almost every country saw that as a great thing to do and a leadership role to take. And I think that worked. As the president has said, that was meant to be a bridge to something better. And what instead happens, and I don't know if this is, this is a little bit of detail, but it's a great piece of detail. Do you know there's no such thing as a generic vaccine for anything? There is no low-cost generic vaccine for anything in the world. Turns out that you can't have them. And the reason was that those big pharma companies shut the door on new drugs the minute that they get their drugs approved. And how do they do that? Well, in order for me right now with a phase 3 that shows I'm safer and better and last longer and protect against more strains and better for older people and all those great things that the data says, and it's clear, right? This isn't Lou saying it, this is the data from thousands of people say that that's true. And yet that drug can't get approved unless you find a 50,000 person group of people that have never had COVID and never been vaccinated with any of the COVID vaccines. Because you have to run a completely naive trial, like a whole new trial. And the people who got the EUAs, people who got approved along the way, never had to do that. Pfizer never had to do that. Johnson & Johnson never had to do that. AstraZeneca never had to do that. The minute they get through the door, and they shut it behind you with their lobbyists, and they shut it behind you with the special interests. And that's what happens. And that's why you end up with $250 vaccines when we're trying to charge 10.
And it just wreaks havoc on the consumer.
Yeah. It's a disaster. I mean, these are the largest costs to our healthcare system.
You are a founder of Axiom Life. I like to talk about the early years of Axiom Life and exactly what it is.
Yeah. So we founded a number of biotech companies over the last 15 years. We've listed 4 of them, one of them in the US, one we're the largest foreign shareholder of any publicly traded Chinese company. And that company vaccinates 60% of all the pigs in China. And with Axiom, we really wanted to focus on what I think is the biggest issues facing humanity, right? So these are the number one cost in the OECD for healthcare is Alzheimer's. Number one cost. In this country alone, in cash spend last year, we spent $364 billion. Primarily Medicare and Medicaid, 270 plus billion Medicare and Medicaid. These are the largest issues facing both our health span but also our total spend in this category, right? So these are the largest issues of waste and the largest issues of human capital waste, right, in terms of just suffering and lives. So if we can go in and we can say, right now we have the only phase 3 privately controlled Alzheimer's prevention asset in the world, which is a crazy statement. So we're the only people that have a phase 3 ready Alzheimer's asset for prevention in the world that privately control it, right? Why does that matter? Well, we've been published in all the normal big journals around our Alzheimer's as well, and we seem to work better than the existing drugs based off of the data that's available right now, and we're absolutely safer than the existing drugs based off the data that's available now. Now, the punchline is that I can sell this, or I could bring this to market for less than 100th of the existing cost of the drugs. So not 10%, less than 1% of the cost of the existing treatments, right? And you can do that, and you can make it accessible, and it can be population health as opposed to an ever shrinking population and an ever higher cost per individual, right?
Since we're talking about Alzheimer's, because it is huge, talk about the biology of Alzheimer's.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of discussion around Alzheimer's, right? And over the last 30 years, I'd say, and the field has grown in its understanding. But basically, this is what happens. For whatever reason, and there's a lot of different theories, your body makes a slightly toxic version of a protein that's naturally occurring. The protein is called A beta. A beta is important, okay? So imagine if you're just sitting here and you have bacteria that crosses your blood-brain barrier, which does happen. The A beta decorates that, and then the dendrites go and they eat that up and they take it away. And that's how we don't get meningeal encephalitis and all these other things that would kill us all the time, right? So it's a good protein. You want that protein. But it turns out that as we age, just like, my hand doesn't look the same as my 3-year-old's hand, right? The skin on my hand doesn't look the same. And the skin on my hand right now doesn't look the same as my 3-year-old when I was 3, right? Same DNA though. It's the same DNA. So why does it look different? Well, it turns out that as we age, it replicates poorly, right? So not every single cell is just like when I was 3. Some of them replicate and they get 95% right. Some of them get 98% right. But at the end of the day, you're degrading in the replication. The proteins in your brain are the same. So as those proteins continue, the 3-year-old proteins, which is most of the skin that you've got, that's why the skin's holding together and doing all the things it's supposed to do, that works great. But the ones that are toxic, the wrinkles and the marks and the other things in these proteins, those are oligomeric proteins. And so they're the same protein but stuck together. So now, instead of being this elegant thing moving through your brain to be able to identify these different things that are toxic, instead now it's bunched together. And when it bunches together, it's slinging through synapses and neurons and bumping into them and killing them. And so there's been a bunch of several publications around the toxic oligomeric form of A beta killing neurons. And this is one of the things that for me is one of the biggest scams in medicine right now, and billions of dollars, tens of years, hundreds of people's lives destroyed, millions of patients destroyed over it. And the lie was about the plaques. So everybody said the plaques are this important thing. And it's like, okay, plaques are important, I understand that, but actually going after the plaque is the equivalent of, I've got a 3-year-old, as you know, Felix. If Felix puts a rubber band around his finger for 4 days, doesn't matter how much blood you put in that finger, it's dead. The whole finger is dead. You got to cut that off before it gets gangrene, right? It doesn't come back. If you don't water your plant for 6 months.
No circulation.
Yeah, if you don't water your plant for 6 months, you give it all the water in the world, give it an ocean of fresh water, it's not going to come back alive. The same thing with your neurons. So when those neurons are dead and now covered in a plaque and covered in cement, somebody going to jackhammer up that cement and the neuron's going to come back alive? It's going to be the only living system in the world that works like that? Fingers don't work like that, blood doesn't work like that, trees don't work like that, nothing works like that. That's the issue. And so that's what they're selling people right now. Now, guess what happens when you do that?
Hold that point. What happens when you do that? Lou Reese is our guest. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back. Welcome back. So guess what happens when you do that?
Yeah, so what happens is you go after these plaques, which are the wrong target, I'm saying, okay? You jackhammer up this stuff in your brain. Now, where do you think it goes? Well, you gotta have that leave your brain, right? So there's two places it can go. It can do the natural drainage in the vascular system on the sides of your brain, or it can go through your cerebral spinal fluid, right? And those are the only options for all of that mess, all that plaque to go out, which, by the way, you didn't need to jack up in the first place. So you jack that up, and what happens? It clogs the exits of your brain, and that's called, in science, they call that a Cmax phenomenon, okay? And the drug effect of that, they give these very clever names. That's called ARIA-E. The reason they call it ARIA-E is because what it is drug-induced brain swelling, and that doesn't sound as good as ARIA-E. That's really what it is. So 17 to 37% of all the people on those Alzheimer's drugs get ARIA-E, drug-induced brain swelling, caused by going after the wrong target and breaking it up and not being able to clear it fast enough out of the body.
So talk to us about breakthrough science.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're in the middle of that right now. So, you know, if I think about it from a high level, we're the only drug that has ever statistically significantly reversed Parkinson's in patients, like made them get better. We're also the only privately, and that's of any drug, and that was published in Nature in November last year. And now with Alzheimer's, we're the only controlled phase 3 prevention asset that is out there. So we're doing our best to break through in the largest areas. I mean, number one category in the world in terms of spend, Alzheimer's, and the number one fastest growing neurodegenerative disease, Parkinson's. And then after that, and I don't know if I've shown you any of these ones, but they're pretty cool. So the number one cause of lack of health span is actually muscular degeneration as you age. And then you get wobbly, and if somebody falls and they break a hip, if you're over 60 and you break a hip, you have an anticipated lifespan of less than a year. That's how dramatic it is. It's like, these are shocking numbers, right? So how do you stop that? Well, it turns out that we have an active immunotherapy that we believe will increase the functional lean muscle mass by between 10 and 15%. Okay, so you can literally solve for that as people age. So you can encourage healthy aging. So these are like, I think of this as the bleeding edge of science, right? Like this is what you can do for every person that would make life better and healthier. And I'm thinking about it like that with each of the examples that we go after. So everything that we try to do is fundamentally geared towards having the largest impact possible, right? And then we also have another one that's really interesting. You know, my deputy kids have a severe nut allergy, and so since they were, you know, really little, we've been having to monitor everything whenever we're together. We've got to, you know, they can't go over for sleepovers without an EpiPen, and even then they can't if the parent doesn't know how to use it, and all these things. And it's causing, you know, like kids go to birthday parties, can't have cake. It's like it's actually a fundamental part of growing up as a child. Now, there's a lot of studies going on about what's causing this spike in food allergy. And you know, we can get into a huge amount of correlations with that, right? That they're studying right now as we speak at the NIH, which is unbelievable work that really needs to happen. But when I look at it, what I see there is you actually have this unique opportunity where if you're going after these largest issues, right? So with food allergy, for example, we have an active immunotherapy that I believe will cure all IgE-mediated allergy. So everything, hay fever, moderate allergy, severe allergy, all of it. And the reason is that there's a genetic population that doesn't have this hormone called IgE. And IgE is what triggers your allergic response. So your B cells make and release this IgE. And we have a mechanism that's novel, that's literally novel, like it's the only one. And we believe that it will mimic the genetic population that has no IgE and doesn't have any downside from that. So if we can do that, It means that there is no allergy. There's no food allergy. There's no asthma. There's no
Futuristic though.
no. But I mean, this is real. Like
It's
this
real.
is yeah. This is real and like ready to go into the clinic right now in humans. So this is finished all of the animal testing, all of the other stuff. This will be prime time. So this isn't a decade away. This is something that is
It's
like,
now.
it's now.
Talk about vaccines.
Yeah. So vaccines, interesting. So I think of vaccines as generating and eliciting an antibody response against infectious disease. So it doesn't matter if it's measles or mumps or COVID or flu. These are infectious diseases that we're generating antibodies against to protect against a foreign agent. That's generally the way that vaccines have been made. The very first vaccines were done in Egypt, and then the first ones in the West were actually done by the wife of the King of England at the time, who noticed that smallpox was being reduced by popping the blisters and then scratching that on to other kids. They would have mild cases of smallpox and then not develop it. So she actually brought that to the UK, and they refused to let her do it for a period of time. And then she got to expand it, and then eventually that became the kind of path for modern inoculation. And if you think about it, the technology that is closest resembling that is something called live attenuated technology. That's where they take the virus and beat it up enough that it can't cause you to get the disease. And then they inject that into you, and then your body develops antibodies against that, in theory, safely. Right? So that's the way that it was supposed to be. The new technologies, if you look at what we do, one of the things that's unique is that we have an active immunotherapy medicine platform. We call it AIM. And that allows for us, for the first time in history, we have the first drug that's ever been approved in animals or humans that goes after an endogenous target, so a self-target. These are the elements of chronic disease. These are the elements of chronic or unhealthy aging. And so we can actually direct the body to become a super ager in those categories, right? So that's really what we're doing. We're empowering the immune system, liberating the immune system to perform like the best performing immune systems, right? So the example that I gave you a couple of weeks ago was my grandfather, right? Grandfather died at 102, didn't really ever have to go to the doctor, was extremely healthy, was body surfing until he was 95, was having sex every day until he was 101, was doing the New York Times crossword puzzle every day of the week except for Saturday in ink, right? Like he was just on it. Like he was performing really well. Like his life was great. Well, as a guy in biotech, like a creepy, grandson, what am I going to do? I'm going to ask him for some blood, right? Like, because you got to find out what's going on with that, right? So we take some blood, we spin it down, and we find out that basically he and a lot of other super agers, and this is, some of this has been documented by a variety of different companies, not just us. They actually automatically generate antibodies against these exact same targets that we're going after for Alzheimer's or for Parkinson's or for
COVID.
Or for COVID, right? So yeah, or for COVID, exactly. And so the best immune responses already are solving for these issues.
Interesting.
But most people don't solve for the chronic disease issues. Most of their immune systems don't respond for that.
But maybe they don't compromise their body with all these medicines and all these other things that we're talking about. It allows the body to naturally do what it was designed to do.
I think there's definitely an element of that. I think there's 100%. The more inflammation, the more toxicity, the more kind of chemical soup that we're in, the more difficult it is to parse out the direct causation. But absolutely, we're seeing that it's the overall immune responses, right? If you look at just the way our immune systems are functioning, there's a lot of different markers we can look at, right? But one of the best quotes that I saw in the last I don't know 3 or 5 days was we're operating, the average 25-year-old male in the United States right now has the testosterone level of a 75-year-old male in the United States 40 years ago.
Wow, that is significant.
It's shocking, right? I mean, these are major disruptors to our immune system's function, right?
Armstrong, Armstrong, Armstrong. Welcome back to the broadcast. Who is Lou Reese?
I mean, that's a tough question, right? Everybody always asks that. I guess it's me. You probably
Your
get
background, what shaped you?
I think that suffering is usually like a key to making
Bree's character.
making things great, right? And I had a lot of suffering, so I'm hoping I don't waste it. And primarily I'm a father. I got 3 kids. And that's the most important thing. Unequivocally, they know it, I know it, that's the most important thing. Now, at the same time, there's all this suffering, and why could you not choose a path where your job is to eliminate that if you can? So a long time ago, I realized that my purpose was to eliminate unnecessary suffering. Now, it doesn't mean I can do all of it, but it means I can do as much of it as I can.
Well, on that note, you talk a lot about the future of global health and democratizing access. Elaborate on that.
So I think that, this is how this started. We're sitting in a canoe, in a dugout canoe, with my son Bear, and we had just come from wherever, and we're at and we were sitting in this canoe, and he's looking really upset, and our friend is rowing it, and he goes, "Dad, so we're visiting this place, and you told me that the average income is $500 a year." And our friend, who's the guide, he's rowing the boat, or paddling the boat, and he's making $2,500 a year. So he's doing pretty good here, right? Now, Dad, we flew here from Hawaii, and you bought a $3,000 ukulele from your friend, David Gomes. What's up with that? And before thinking, I just said, we're all liars and hypocrites. Every single person that you've ever met, including us, we're all liars and hypocrites. And the reason is, we'll sit here, we'll tell you that the value of human life is the same for every person. Doesn't matter where they're from, doesn't matter what color they are, doesn't matter if they're male or female, all these things. And then our actions will belie a different reality. And they'll do it all over the world. And so that was the moment when democratizing health had to happen. That was the moment when I was like, whoa, we have the power here to take something, and instead of charging $250,000 per patient per year and seeing how many, rich assholes we can save, we could actually go after, how can we give this to every single person that needs it? And how can you have technology make that accessible, right? And so I tell people that the difference between rich people toys and technology is accessibility. So when the internet was just 45 people at the NSA, not useful. When the internet goes to every single person around the world for free, hugely useful. That's tech. So I think we put the tech in biotech, and my goal is to make these things democratized and demonetized and available to every single person that needs them, and not in some sort of patronizing, over the top patronizing way, like the Gates Foundation or any of that. That's not my goal. My goal is actually to do it as equals and have innovation and technology allow for that problem to be solved.
What gives you hope, areas that, since you've been on this biotechnology journey, where we've made progress? It's a long, deep pause.
Yeah. So I'll tell you 2 great places that we've made progress. Okay. The first is 25 years ago or 20 years ago, our investment in biotechnology stimulated China to make a similar investment in their own biotechnology. Over the last 5 years, So now 20 years of work over the last 5 years, every year we have in-licensed more new drugs from China than we've licensed to China. Think about that. Are you aware that the innovation engine right now in the world for biotechnology is not the United States? That they have lost that rosy perch and that China has taken that and that those new drugs are coming in right now? Most people are unaware of that, right? Now, because most people still think that China is knocking stuff off or making like a cheaper version or whatever. But it turns out like that car has moved forward and now is producing things for the whole world in a positive way. Right, so now they're getting licensed into the US. They're doing trials in the US to make sure that the data is good, and then those drugs will help patients. That's amazing. So we took an entire, one of the largest countries in the world, and turned them into an innovator in this space because they were following our example of how well the innovation in biotech was working. That's amazing. So that's a positive story for the world. That's a positive story for humanity. It's also a scary story for the United States, because it means that we need to step on the gas with this innovation and figure out how, if we want to be the leader in innovation, how we maintain that.
So what is Lou Reese's and Mei Mei's future?
You know, I tell people that we're gonna prevent Alzheimer's and we're gonna prevent Parkinson's and maybe muscular wasting and maybe allergy. And after that, after we get all that done, my mom will still tell my two sisters that if I had just worked harder, I could have been a doctor. So the answer is, who knows, right? Like, I think that the big thing is we want to go after the biggest things that are facing humanity, right? Like literally the biggest things facing humanity. I want to save trillions of dollars in the United States in medical spend so that we can use that for other things. I want to save millions of lives, like literally millions of lives, from this unprecedented amount of suffering that is completely unnecessary. And so I think that, you know, Mei Mei and I, we get to do that. Like, you know, every day. And right now, actually, we're blessed because you couldn't be in a moment where there, like ever in the history of this country, in my lifetime, right? So in the last 43 years, there has not been a single administration that I would have had the belief to do something big and different and right. And I think that right now you're in that world. And I think that Secretary Kennedy, I think that the president, particularly the president with his vision of teaming up there, I think it's a historic opportunity in leadership. I really do. I think it's it doesn't mean that it's easy, but I think that there's a historic opportunity to like regain that mantle of innovation.
How do you make up for the void in US AI spending where it was really legitimate and just no longer there? Who absorbs that vacuum?
So the short answer is we'll see, right? Because I think that's going to be an active. I think each one is going to be a little different in terms of where they find that. You know, I think that the private sector has, particularly in health, has benefited so tremendously for so many years that you would think that they should be footing a bigger piece of that bill. So I can tell you this, right? What does Big Pharma say? Why do they have to charge a lot for drugs? Everybody knows this. It's because we're the innovation engine of the world, right? And we have to do this, and that's what the US has to pay. We've got to pay more so that other people, we're paying for their innovation, right? And we're doing it in the US. Mm-hmm. And so that's why the drugs have to cost a lot. It turns out that is an absolute lie. Absolute lie. How can I, with no money from any of those sources, how can I be willing and able to provide a drug for 1% of the price of their drugs and make that drug? So I'm the living, walking example that says that they are lying when they use that as their reason. It is an absolute lie. And so we don't need to charge the prices that they're charging to maintain margin, and we don't need to charge the prices that they're charging to create more innovation.
What would you change with healthcare providers, hospitals, Big Pharma, and the patient?
So I think that if you look at what HHS has been doing right now with AI, right, and trying to integrate data and records, I think that's actually hugely valuable. So just the management of information for patients, super valuable. Most people are unaware of this, and it's a shocking thing. I even have trouble saying it out loud. But the number 3 killer in the United States is medical malpractice. So 300,000 people die from doctors making a mistake a year. The number 3 cause of death is the doctor messing up. Okay? AI solves for a lot of that, right? I can tell you when I was a kid, I got put in the hospital for asthma. Okay, and I was, you know, my lips were blue. It was emergency room, all the things. And I'm sitting there, and my mom refused to leave the hospital room. And my dad's like, Susan, you got to go home, get some rest. My mom slept in that hospital room and slept in that little cot with me most of the time. In the middle of the night, one night, I remember waking up, and these guys come in, and they've got a surgery gurney, and they're going to take me to get my kidney removed. I was in there for asthma. So if my mom had not been sleeping in the hospital room and gotten into a physical and vocal altercation with the doctor to advocate for me not having a kidney removed, I would be down a kidney for no reason. Oh. But this is every day. This is every day at all hospitals all the time. The coordination and the collaboration and the understanding of the information is unbelievably challenging. And so I think fixing that is a big deal. I think fixing our food supply is a big deal. Again, we're seeing historic steps taken on that to catch up with where Europe is. I think that's huge. I think we're reducing our overall toxic exposure and exposure to toxins that we know are bad. But in terms of healthcare, I think we need to go for lower cost drugs. I think we need to go for innovation, and I think we need to encourage that. And I think we need to encourage things that are population health and that are about healthcare and not sick care. So I think we need to like flip that script and focus the innovation on those things.
How do people find out more about you and what you're involved in?
Well, they can go to axiom.com and learn very little. Most, I mean, the main deal is, you know, we've tried to.
And that's AXXIUM.
Yes, sir. And we've tried really hard to be under the radar and do the work. Right, like we've tried to do the work and just focus on doing the work.
Well, the thing that we try to do is introduce our global audience to people they've never heard of before, who has such an impact on their health in ways they could never imagine. And in fact, guided by virtues, guided by trust, and guided by integrity. These are the things that people find missing because the world has become so vulnerable because they just don't know who to trust anymore. And you're one of those few souls out there, you and your wife, May, that they've not heard of, who's always fighting for them every day. And so we wanted to introduce them to you and your great work and pray for the continuation of it. And we really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you,
for this edition
Thank you.
of the Armstrong Williams Show. And thank you for joining us.
Hello, I'm Dorian Francis reporting for the Armstrong Williams Show. Smartphones often get a bad rap. And let's be honest, it's not hard to see why. Hours spent scrolling through mindless cat videos or endless social media feeds can leave us feeling drained. But like all emerging technology, the power and the good of a smartphone come from the beholder more than the device itself. In our ongoing series, Are You Smarter Than Your Smartphone?, we're diving into 3 ways you can use your phone every day to boost your mental and physical health. Ways you might not have thought of before. Let's get started. First up, biofeedback training with your smartphone's camera. Most people don't know this, but cutting-edge apps like to use your phone's camera to measure your heart rate variability, a key indicator of stress and emotional balance. By placing your finger over the camera lens, the app tracks subtle changes in blood flow and guides you through breathing exercises to sync your heart and brain. Studies show this can reduce anxiety and improve focus in just minutes a day. It's like having a personal stress coach in your pocket without the heavy price tag. Some of these apps have a cost, but do your research. We found several apps that are free. And the best part? You don't need extra gadgets. They're just your phone and a few minutes to retrain your body's stress response. It's an obscure but powerful way to take control of your mental health. Apps should be one touch point, not the complete solution.
Smartphones are really intended to just be a jumpstart. They are not meant to be your end-all be-all. If you are going to your smartphone, regardless of the app that you're utilizing, and you are getting your information from start to finish and not having any opportunities to process that information with a real human, then that's where I think the disadvantage comes in. If we can just use it as a starting point and then make ourselves go that next step to connecting with a human, and whether it's individual or group or whatever that platform is with other individuals, but sharing fellowship.
So next time you pick up your smartphone, think beyond the cat videos. Really consider the amazing power in the palm of your hand. Use it for its full potential, not just as a mindless tool to scroll through the most trivial items of life.